So, one of the things that interfered with my relationship with Justine, messed with my relationship with Sarah, was the desire to touch my sleeping partner. They didn't mind being touched, but of course if I'm touching a sleeping partner and I don't want to wake them up, it's not that I want them to wake up because I want something from them and I'm going to take it anyway. I'm actually trying to do it subtly and gently and just get off without waking them and then go back to sleep. If I've woken up next to Justine, even when we're not getting on very well and we're not having sex together, I still feel the need to ejaculate. So it's a masturbatory experience, but using her to excite me. And with Justine especially, who kept herself hidden, she wasn't comfortable with having herself seen, it made it even more likely that I would do that. Sarah didn't. Sarah never had any problems revealing herself. She was beautiful. But I still wanted to touch her in my own time, in my own way, without having to please her as well. That's the thing about masturbation, is that it's just a solitary act about pleasing or releasing me, and then it's over. I don't want to have to also please her. That's not what that moment is about. A joint moment, when we're both awake, when we're both turned on, when we're both intimate, that's different. But it's like I'm having to be devious, I'm having to be secretive. And at first, when I used to do it with Justine, she would sometimes wake up, sometimes not, but always seemed to be available. No, always seemed to be aware of. And the moment that I felt that she wasn't asleep, I didn't want to touch her anymore, because now it's kind of like I'm taking something. I've struggled with this for quite some time, the ethical, moral aspects of doing that. But putting those aside just for a moment, assuming that there is an implied permission for me to, if I wake up in the night and I just want to release so that I can go back to sleep with minimum of fuss, I don't want to wake her, I don't want her involved, just let me do what I do, clean up, turn over, go back to sleep. I used to do it, I did it with Greer as well, but then Greer was withholding intimacy. She wasn't wanting to be close to me, and I'm lying next to somebody I am so turned on by, I couldn't help but want to touch her. I couldn't help but feel turned on, and I couldn't sleep until I'd come, and I had to wait for her to be asleep, and she wasn't aware of my doing it. At least I don't think she was, for most of it anyway. Sarah never liked it. Justine didn't mind at first, and then towards the end it was so important that she was asleep, and it was so difficult to tell, and I just couldn't get there. I felt embarrassed, ashamed to be discovered taking pleasure for myself but not wanting to give it, not wanting to be with her otherwise. And of course all it would take was an ejaculation to completely reset my desire threshold. So even if I was going to, I didn't want to. I was drained. I'm not a young man anymore, so it's over, it's finished for some time, several days, a week, before I'd want to do that again. And if I did it the next time the same way, then it's going a long time without Justine actually having any kind of turn on moments, that I'm not reaching out for her, it just didn't work. But I still found a way to get something from it myself. And I obviously realised that this must be affecting my relationship. Perhaps if I had never done it, if I'd never started, when things were okay between us, and I just felt like I could just do that, and did it, and it was good for me, and it becomes more exciting to sort of take something I'm not supposed to have, or I haven't been given direct permission, or it's not a mutual thing, than only seek. And there was plenty of opportunity. No matter how many times we were in bed, Justine was always wanting to be close and intimate and touch and be touched. She always wanted me to touch her. And sometimes I would touch her, not just sexually, non-sexually, but often, and that would go on for ages, and then often it would just end up sexual, because I would eventually get turned on by it. Towards the end, I would still touch her, but it would not get sexual. I would then go to sleep, and perhaps at a later point, when I thought she was asleep, I would do my thing. And it's just a gentle thing. It's just a touching while I masturbate, which is not too different from watching porn or looking at a magazine, even fantasizing, which I didn't do. I'm a visual person. I've always been visual. So with Justine withholding the visual because she wasn't comfortable with me seeing her, that made it even harder for me to resist the urge to touch her the way I wanted to, just me. But if I hadn't have begun that at the beginning, if I had not been that way, if I have not chosen somnamphila, or given into the desire for it, which I had done many, many times with Sarah, even when I absolutely knew that it wasn't acceptable, when we were in a period of split up, but I was still there, we were still parents to Emily. I wasn't actually living there, I was living in my own place, but I would be there most of the day, and into the evening we'd watch things. Sarah would fall asleep on the sofa, and I might then try to touch her and masturbate, and it would be incredibly exciting to do so. My heart would almost pop out of my chest, and the one time when she woke up, it was like, I was a stalker who'd crept into somebody's house, and I wasn't supposed to be there, and she woke up in the process of me touching her, and somehow I got away with it, but I almost had a heart attack. I knew it was wrong, but yet it was exciting. Just like when I was in my criminal days, I knew it was wrong. I knew that I was stealing, I knew that it was fraud, but I still did it because it was exciting. Far more exciting than anything that work ever brought me. Far more exciting than the sexual relationship that me and Sarah had. She was just passive, really. And it just never worked. It never worked. It's never worked. I've never had, even though I've had many sexual partners and long-term sexual partners, it's never worked. I've never felt the desire stay. I've never wanted to continue physical contact after a certain period of time. It's just too complicated. It's too messy. It's too needy. It's just, I don't like it. I just don't like it. But at first, when the lusty feelings and the in-love feelings and the infatuation feelings are there, that's all you want. That's all you want to do, to consummate that feeling in sexual intimate embrace. Especially as I'd gone for a long period of time before Justine, where I wasn't involved with anybody physically. But I can't say, if I had not taken that route, if I had not been susceptible to that, if I was not that kind of person, would my relationship with Justine have stayed stronger, been different, felt different? Because there would have been the continuing desire to be with my wife, to be physical, to be intimate, to be loving and tender, which would have avoided some of the issues or some of the damage that some of the issues caused, because we were in a better place together. It's hard to say. I suspect yes, but it's hard to say. Masturbation is just so simple. When there's a need to release, whether it's a physical thing because of the benign cyst on my testicle, which I've had 25 years, 30 years or something, it's just part of what I have, or whether it's just suddenly feeling that that's what I want to do. It doesn't involve anybody else, it's just something I can do very simply, and then it's over and I can forget about it. I don't make a big deal about it, I just do what's necessary and it's done. And sometimes I let it go for 6 weeks in between. I have ideas that I will continue that. I know that they say that one should, for the health of the prostate, there should be some activity there, 2 or 3 times a year perhaps. I haven't never got to that point where it's as infrequent as that, but certainly there's no thought about it, there's no desire for it for, several weeks, many weeks, and then I just usually do it. And then the same period of time goes by before the next attempt. I know that I still have the same attraction that I've always had towards women. I find women attractive, and that hasn't changed. What has changed is any feelings of wanting anything from it. There's no desire to be with them, there's no imagining of what would happen, there's no fantasy. There's just like you might go into a gallery and see a beautiful work of art, really appreciate it, but not have to own it. I don't need to have it, I don't have to bring it home. It's always been a challenge for me, and I suspect it comes from, and I may have mentioned it in previous recordings, the issues that I had as a child when I was very young and decided to go to exploring my dad's wardrobe when he was out and my mum was out, and I found a small stack of porno mags, and I looked at them, and this was in the 70s, and it was early 70s, and it was very exciting. I wanted to explore, I wanted to know what it was like. I was turned on by these amazingly beautiful women, fully natural, with hair and everything, and it took me a long time before I was actually able to have that experience, but I think it messed with me, and I'm still experiencing the ramifications of that. At least that's the theory. It may not be true, it may only be true in part, but it definitely affected a 9-year-old boy, an 8-9-year-old boy who was suddenly very sexually aware, but very naive as well. I mean, maybe I was older than 8 or 9. It's hard to say. I didn't actually begin masturbating until I was 13 or 14. I had no idea what to do or why. I only had, sometimes would have sexual feelings but wouldn't know what to do about them. So my memory is not intact as far as exactly how old I was, but I was very young. Certainly far too young to be allowed to look at those things back then. I mean, now kids can watch porn on there if the parents haven't stopped it, but they'll find a way. Somebody's phone, somebody's computer, they can watch porn online. It's often there are places that, are you aged over 21? Yes. All you have to do is click yes, you don't have to prove it. And often there are places that don't ask, they don't care, they just want people to visit their site. I can't imagine what it would have been like. But then it was so taboo back then that you didn't talk about it, and because it was so taboo and hidden, and sex wasn't talked about, sex education was barely non-existent. We never really had it, except to scare us by showing us diseases. Ugh, I remember watching that day. It was horrible. I still have those images in my head, being shown a large erect penis producing pus because it had gonorrhea. or something like that. That was what the school decided was sex education. Not to educate us, not to inform us, but to frighten us and to scare us. My parents never talked to me about it. I had no idea. I was very naive. And as a result of that naivete, I did things, explored people in ways that probably weren't healthy. But just whenever I got the opportunity to touch or to look, I took it because I was curious and I just wanted to know. In my naive, childish way, I just wanted to know. But there was a part of me that seemed more mature or more aware as a result, perhaps, of having had access to adult porno magazines at such a young age. The psychologists would perhaps have a better understanding, but I am what I am. Now, it doesn't mean I have to act on what it is I feel I want to do, but there's this excitement, because it's rare, it's very rare for me to be with somebody, so that the temptation to touch them when they're drunk, when they're passed out, when they're fast asleep, in a way that doesn't wake them up, is very exciting, at least at first. It's very difficult to resist the temptation of it. It's very tempting. I have resisted it, but eventually, at some point, it always somehow gets the better of me and I give in to the temptation. I'd like to think that won't happen again, but I can't be sure. And if I make it a taboo, then it makes it even harder to resist it. I have to transcend it. It has to become something I just don't want. So the best way for me to avoid those situations is to be in a non-physical relationship, to be not involved with anybody, to just be on my own and not really have sexual desires or thoughts, not to go there, not to need it. And that's mostly how I am. Justine was very difficult in that sense because she was such a breath of fresh air. She was just so much fun to be around. She was so intelligent, so aware, and certainly for the first couple of months, she used to make me feel like I was a rock star, and she was a groupie. That she so wanted to be next to me, to touch me, to make me feel good, to be touched by me. It was like I was this big rock star who had sort of chosen her, pointed to her in the audience and told my roadie to bring her up to the hotel room, and she was just awestruck at having the opportunity to be with her idol. That's how it felt. It was just exhilarating and very egotistical, you could say, very ego inflating. And when that didn't sustain itself, as obviously it wouldn't be able to, especially as there were issues between us that slowly began to appear more often, now something's missing, this wonderful, intimate, present feeling. I couldn't wait for her to come back from work or for us to be able to go upstairs, because she was body conscious and we never had sex in the day or anything like that. We could have very sexually charged moments, but we would never complete it. She would always want to wait. She needed to wait until it was dark, until we were under the covers, until the day was over. Which was fine at first, but often for me, by then I wasn't interested anymore. I can't get excited and then hold that all day. I want to express it there and then move on. But for her it was different, and that caused us issues on its own. So I just wanted to put this out there. I just wanted to get this out, make a recording about it. I understand a lot of it. I've looked at it, I've explored it, I've definitely looked at the somnamphobia explanations and that, and voyeurism, which is another paraphilia. I have those things. Perhaps I can explain where they come from, but the fact is I have them. I just don't act on them. I mean, there are people out there who are, for instance, paedophiles, but they just don't act on it. Are they still bad people? Is it bad to be naturally paedophilic for whatever reason, wherever it comes from, but to make sure absolutely make sure that they don't act on it. They are inactive paedophiles. We shouldn't judge them as bad people because they're not giving way to what society deems absolutely inappropriate, even though there are, even today, still societies, but there definitely were in the past, where underage children were given in marriage, where 12-year-olds would be involved in sex. They would be giving birth at sort of very young ages, getting pregnant as soon as they were physically able to. Now we frown upon that kind of thing, partly because it's a control thing. They are deemed not to be able to deal with it and shouldn't have to, and I understand that. But a paedophile, someone who has feelings and sexual attractions towards young people, but doesn't act on it because he knows it's wrong, he knows society would not approve and he would be punished severely and there would be severe consequences for getting caught for that act, and chooses not to act upon it, it doesn't make him a bad person just because he's still a paedophile. He hasn't actually committed any act, only in his head, perhaps looking at pictures on the internet. But that's not the same as acting on it, so we shouldn't judge him for it. And those who do act on it, we should understand why they act on it. Where does it come from? What causes it? Where did it start? What was the trigger? Looking back, going back to their childhood, going back to the choices. It's not straightforward just to vilify and demonize and condemn somebody who may actually not be well. It may be some kind of issue that requires looking at. When I was a young man, 12, 13, 14, I also used the opportunity, if I had it, to touch children younger than me, cousins or friends or school friends if they'd let me. But that was just part of exploration, and it doesn't make me feel like that was paedophilic because I was as young as they were, or maybe a little bit older, but certainly not an adult. Now, of course, I don't have sexual feelings or want to touch young people because I'm not a young person. That was just all that was available to me. As a young boy, 10, 11, 12, after having seen those images in my dad's magazines, there were no adults for me to play with. There were only children. Doesn't mean it was right, but it was what happened back then before I knew better. I have talked about this before. I have written about this before. I have explored it. I have shared some of it. I have even put it online to see what kind of reaction it would produce. I don't like it. I would prefer not to have it, but that is how it is. And for me, the best way to deal with it is to just avoid any situation where it could come out. That if I find myself in bed with another woman, even if it's not my girlfriend or even somebody that I'm sleeping with, the temptation to want to see or touch would be very difficult to deal with. Obviously, such a situation almost never happens. It's almost never happened in my life. But yet, such a situation would probably result in me having to resist a powerful temptation to satisfy an urge that was exciting for me, that was calling me to do it. And it seems it's only a little thing at the time. It seems it's almost nothing. Sex is so ubiquitous. People just have it so easily in so many different situations. It's almost harmless. At least that's what it seems at the time. I don't think it is harmless. I think it's more serious than that. But in that moment when it's quiet and dark and the person sleeping next to me is snoring, perhaps they've had quite a bit to drink and they're unlikely to awaken, it's almost impossible for me to resist this unusual moment, because I won't have many of them. And if it's not important, if it doesn't really matter, well, why be so reticent? Trouble is, it's a slippery slope, and if I do it once, I want to do it twice, and if I do it twice, I want to do it again and again. And now I'll seek it, now I'll wait for it, now I'll watch for it, maybe even try to create it. Here, have another drink. No, go on, let's have another one. You like these? I tried all kinds of things with Sarah, even giving her drugs, even taking opium. Gave her cannabis, opium, salvia divinorum. I touched her on all kinds of things. Got her extremely drunk, only to have her puking up all the time instead of passing out. You know, I was able to have my way with her sometimes, but it wasn't good. It doesn't produce loving thoughts, and it's a slippery slope. And I'm sure that there are other people who have gone this way, who have ended up forcing and raping and all of that. And I could see there were moments when I could have made such a choice. I never made that choice, but I could see that it was easier to make that choice after having done some of the things I had done previously. So it's a slippery slope, and not everyone is as disciplined or as conscientious as I am, and that they go further than they mean to, and once you cross a certain line, there's no going back. So I just wanted to talk about it spontaneously, and